So Neil is the one who's responsible for putting together Bitesize Irish's online courses. We have an online learning platform with 3 different types of membership. And so when Neil has launched a new module, I like to just invite him in while all that sort of information is fresh in his mind to tell us about it and to answer questions on that topic. So the topic tonight is asking questions in Irish. That's the name of our new module. And that's available, Neil, for it's Bitesize Irish Explore and Grow members. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to say a few words about that? I mean, I suppose I should say myself that initially the idea for this came from one of our members saying that he found it hard to know what way to construct questions and what question words to use. So when I mentioned that to you, you thought it was worth kind of running with that and putting together something to take a little bit of the mystery out of it. So yeah, go ahead and tell us about it there.
Yeah, well, that's it's so valuable to get that feedback from our learners, because it reminds us of the things which we all struggled with learning. I'm not a native speaker, unlike Ben, so I just learned it at school. So yeah, asking questions, it is a bit of a tricky corner of Irish grammar. There's a little bit of extra issues that we mightn't have in English, or maybe the issues are different in English. But anyway, so very grateful to Ben and to the learner who suggested this topic. When I heard of that, I thought, yes, this is perfect. And it's perfect for the Aistear reference pack, which is available to Grow and Explore members, of course. The reference pack is a little bit more specific to one topic per course or per mini course, and it's always a deep dive. You can always, with the reference pack courses, you could do the whole thing, or you could just leave it and come back every time you have an issue with that, like a reference book on the shelf. Some of our other reference pack topics are dealing with dialects and initial mutations, sin Shevu and Uru. So things like that, things where you might just have to come back to it every now and again. So asking questions in Irish is the latest addition there to the reference pack.
Yeah, and it must be said that the feedback from our members has been overwhelmingly positive on this one. It's nice to have all of that information in the one place and to have the little differences, the whys and hows of asking who and what explained to you all in the one place, so you can come back to it. So well done. Yeah, it's really, really good. So another thing that Neil does is when he does a new module, generally he puts together a cheat sheet, which is available free to download and free to share, which contains kind of the essence of some of the basics, I suppose, of those modules. Some of them are a bit less than basic, like the one on the conditional, in fairness. So they're really good free resources that you can share with other people in, say, Irish language conversation groups or fellow students, whatever your means or your place of study happens to be. So first of all, I'm just going to show you where you can get that. We have a blog, and if you go to our blog, then it's on the main page, asking questions in Irish cheat sheet, so you can download it for free, and there's no copyright or anything like that. It's entirely free to use and to share. So if I can find that on the desktop, if I just throw that up on the screen there, Neil, will you give us a little run through it and
sure
have a look at the little some of the points in it. So yeah, it's new to all of
the cheat sheet always contains some of the most important points of the latest bite-sized lesson or course or module on Aistear. Sometimes it could be just the gist of it, or it could be an important part of the latest module or course or whatever. So there is always a lot more on the website itself for members. But yeah, as Ben said, to Falchero of you're very welcome to use the cheat sheet, share it around, and hopefully it's a good little reference in itself.
Okay, so this is not what I'm looking for. This is the page where you can get it, which I was referring to. So I'll give it another shot and see if I can get it up on the screen here. Yeah. There we go. So Neil, just oberlum nor hasha now bugga Moscow. Let me know when I need to move the mouse.
Michael, so we started by, and it's the same structure, the same order in the actual course as it is on the cheat sheet. The first thing we need to deal with is yes and no questions, by which I mean the answer would be yes or no, of course. So in English, that always starts with a verb like do or did or will. So like the examples, did you go there? Will there be? Did you buy a new bicycle? And so on. So in Irish, for yes/no questions, we use the particle on or the particle depending. Most tenses use on, and that demands uru on the following verb, on j and to, on me, kosher, shul. And the particle is mostly just past tense, not even all the past tense verbs, because there's some irregulars. So chani to, one to saltas, plus shevu. Very typical, distinctive feature of the past tense, using like that. So that's the yes/no questions. And of course, famously, we don't have a yes or no in Irish, or at least we don't have a general word for yes or no. So in the course, there's a little bit more about that. How can we answer yes or no when we don't have a yes or no? The answer, of course, means we always use the verb itself, the same verb in the same tense. On j and to, present tense, the verb che, cheim or niheim. And chani to, did you buy? Chani, near chani. So it's a different yes/no for each verb in each tense. But more about that in the course itself, of course. After that, the next question type, well, it's all of the other ones: who, what, where, when, why, all of these ones. So they're not yes/no answers. It's more specific answers about like a person or a thing or a place and so on. So the first up, as you can see, is asking who. And as it says there, K plus direct relative clause. Now, this sounds a bit grammar heavy, and it is, but there's kind of no way of getting around it. But this direct relative clause, it is the little particle a and shevu, or if it's in the past tense, we could have our D apostrophe as well, which is typical in the past. So K a ve ilaher, K a G, piece of jernach and chaka. So there's a little a and shevu on the word be, and the a there. So that's what a direct relative clause is. It's just a little a and shevu. We can see it again if we're asking what. The word cod. Now, cod is not the only word we use to ask what. In Ulster, we like to just say cujay for everything. And there's also the word cared as well. But cod is a nice simple one. So that's what we've included on the cheat sheet. So cada harla. See a and shevu again. Cada ta shkifa and shin. Well, ata is a direct relative clause. It doesn't have the shevu, aha, but maybe in some dialects they might pronounce that. Do they pronounce something like that in Kerry, Ben, with the shevu on that?
On a thaw?
Aha?
On a thaw, well, you see, you will hear aha, but it's not really for that reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's not really for it's not for a grammatical reason, let's say. It's just a quirk of pronunciation.
Okay, yeah. But it's kind of a quirk that there's no shevu on that T. Really, there shouldn't be, we follow the rules. But, the next one up after what, we have which, because they're very closely related, aren't they? Now, which of them, keaku, sometimes keaku kyan, which of them do you prefer? Keaku is farlat. Ken kyan, ken da. So which one, ken kyan or ken kyan, maybe down in Kerry, ken da, which color? So if we're getting more specific, like that's the difference between which and what, isn't it? Is much more specific, this one or that one. And the lady here choosing her nice pink tops. Ken da ata nis jesha, which color is nicer? So if you see the verb there, ahatni and lat ata, that is also the direct relative clause, like above. We haven't seen the indirect just yet. So the next page, please, Ben.
Okay, then.
Asking when. Cahan is the most common word I hear for asking when. Although I didn't grow up with that word, because we usually say Kenur, Sawalia in Ulster. Kenur a Dilshiv, Kenur a Vein Dinure. But Cahan is more common generally, I think. So that's what we've included here. So direct relative clause. So that a and shevu, or in the past a and d apostrophe. But if you see just below asking where, you can see the color has changed for the question part, and it's green instead of orange. For asking where, we could use ka and indirect relative clause. Ka will an shapa blahana. Ka nyachitu sira. We don't use the form ta in it. We never have ka ta. That just sounds odd to us, I think. Or for the past tense, huime, we'd never say ka huitu, ka nyachitu. So it's that question form, an wiltu, an nyachitu. It's that question form, or it's a with uru on the verb, just like we do in a lot of questions. So this is the indirect relative clause. So why as well. So we can see where and why are the ones especially which use indirect relative clauses. So asking where, again, ka is the simplest. We can also say kahach or kenach, a will and shoppa. And asking why, we've got kenfa. Again, it's the most common version of asking why, but there are other ways. Up in Ulster, we love to say katia. Katia nurchishin. Why did you say that? But kenfa and nurchishin. Why did he say that?
And is that T-U-I-G-E? Sorry, Neil. Is it called? Is that T-U-I-G-E? Tige. Got the.
I've seen that written, but I would write it out C-A-D-C-H-U-I-G-E. Cad chuige. But there's pronunciation, the way it comes out in the wash when people talk is katia. Katia.
Okay.
They run together a bit, some of these common phrases, but that's very Ulster if you're saying that. So even with my classes in Dublin, I'm happy to recommend kenfa. Everybody understands it too. So we can see kenfa and nurch, kenfa a will. See that uru on dirch and that a will, that question form, that's the indirect relative clause again. So where and why, it's the indirect. And just below we can see how. Again, there's more than one way to do it. And some of these take different forms, different kinds of relative clause. So conas is a nice handy one because it takes the direct relative clause. Of course, the question everybody knows is conas atatu, but ken chi a will to. That's a very good example of the difference there. Why do we say ken chi a will to and not ken chi atatu? It's, conas takes a direct, ken chi takes an indirect relative clause. So how is that word pronounced? Conas nicher and fakalshin. How did you find it? Ken chi aramshitu e. That little is another sign that it's an indirect relative clause in this case as well. And English has a lot of questions about how, actually, doesn't it? You think about how long, how far, how many, how much, and so on. So we've just a couple more examples of that kind of thing here. And you can see the color orange, that means it's direct relative clause. So kehol fada is ata and show. Keved dinya ata and show. Okay, so it's that ata form, not a will.
Yes. And of course, the noun staying in the singular there with kveid.
Yes, Shinfir.
Lovely. Yes. So, Gurmaha got the nail. Thanks for that. Where am I?
Yeah, that's a super fast overview of all of that. There's a lot more in the course itself in the Ashta reference pack. So a lot more details about other options and other ways to say these things, and more examples, of course. And of course, you can listen to the examples too, which is the best thing.
So just a reminder there, folks, that what we've just been looking at for the last few minutes is a free cheat sheet that Neil has put together on asking questions in Irish. And it's a lot of information to digest in 2 or 3 minutes. But the nice thing about it is that you don't have to. It's free to download and to share from Bitesize Irish's blog. So you'll find that again here. So you can go and get that, and you can just do it a bit at a time. It's generally the best way to learn these things. So learn a bit, look for examples, practice, and review it again. So Gramila Magat the Nail, just to say that if you're watching this, you're free to drop questions into the comments section on YouTube. We'll get those live. I'm not sure what the story is with Facebook. I think we'll get those live as well. And if you're watching this back at some stage in the future and you have a question on tonight's topic, which is asking questions in Irish, then again, you can leave us a comment and we'll get to it within a week or two and do our best to help you. So a few questions came in prior to us going on air. This is the way we do it. We send out a newsletter which has an invitation to submit questions. So again, if you'd like to sign up to our newsletter, there's the address there for that. And more generally, if you want to know anything about Bitesize in terms of memberships or free resources that we have, quizzes or things to motivate you, then you'll find all the relevant links there on Bitesize Irish /links. So Neil, Kamitsul na Keshna a hánig isteach Rivré. So
Michael.
Nish. Tágama Martian Kiana Honig Shacho Janine. This came in from Janine, who's one of our Grow members. I'll just put this up. Okay, so Janine says, is there a standard format to building questions using question words, especially past tense? For example, where were you last night? And not. And what form does the verb take? And can you tell me something about sentence order as well?
So we just took a whistle-stop tour, around the cheat sheet, which was kind of a condensed version of the whole course. So there's all of this is in that course. Standard format. Well, there isn't one standard way we do every question, and that is the tricky thing. There are kind of these two structures that we use, and it's the thing I just mentioned that sounds very scary: the direct relative clause and indirect relative clause. Now, that sounds very technical, of course, but after certain question words, we use a and shevu. After conas, we use a and shevu. After ke, we use a and shevu. But after other question words, we use a and uru, which is the indirect relative clause. But in the past tense, that changes a little bit. In the past tense, instead of a and uru, for most verbs, we use and shevu, ar and shevu. That's typical of the past tense, if you know those verbs. So that is the two basic forms, the two basic structures that we're using after these question words. Now, the trick then is knowing which ones you need to use with which. So that's the key thing here, I suppose. Where were you last night is Janine's example question. Where were you? Well, there's a few ways to ask where. Remember, we could just use ka. We could have kenach that Janine herself has used, or kahach, another version of that. And all three of them, all the where questions, take an indirect relative clause. So the verb, what form does the verb take? It will have a and uru, or if it's past tense, it would be and shevu. Because it's where were you, I would say karotu or kenach arotu, kahach arotu. Ro, of course, is Ulster pronunciation. That is a word you probably know, R-A-I-B-H. I pronounce it as ro. How do you say this word, Ben?
Vroom, vroom, rev.
Rev, very different indeed. So this word can sound a bit different from place to place. Ro, row, rev. That's just our accent, our dialect, but we'll all be using the same word for sure after kenach or ka. Where were you? Sentence order, well, the question particle is at the start, and then the verb, of course, and then the subject, because our Irish is always verb, subject, object. But you cannot wrote to, karev to, something like that. And a time phrase like last night is probably at the end of the sentence. Cannot wrote to arer. Karev to arer, something like that. In this particular example. So it all depends on knowing which kinds of questions take which kind of relative clause.
Yes, Gurmagat the nail. So just for anybody who's coming in late to us, I'm here with Niall, and Niall is Bitesize Irish's online content developer. And we recently launched a new module of our Ashter course, which is asking questions in Irish. That's for Bitesize Explore and Grow members. We have an online learning platform with online courses and with live elements as well for our learners to participate in. So Niall is just taking questions on asking questions in Irish. If you have a question, you're welcome. We'd love if you just drop it into the comments bar on Facebook or on YouTube. So we have a couple of questions that came in advance. So we'll just go to the next one of those, Niall. This one came in from Sue, and it's kind of on a similar tack, though in a way there is more than one question in this question. So Sue says, when do I use a will and when do I use a thaw when I make questions? So I feel that that's one question, Niall, and then the second one, it's a little bit, it could be taken two ways. Essentially, for example, cén chuí a bhfuil tú and conas a tá tú, they're two standard forms of addressal in two different dialects, and there isn't really a reason why somebody might choose one and then choose another other than like in this context. So I don't know if this example stands. So maybe take the first question.
I suppose the first things first. A will and a tha. Sue is rightly comparing them and thinking, why on earth do we use one and then another? And you will to conas a tatu, or as we say in Ulster, Gaeilge tatu. They all mean the same thing. But a will, a tha. And it's, as I said, it's based on which kind of relative clause we use. A tha is direct, a will is indirect. And those are just labels, I guess. And after conas, after Gaeilge, we use a direct relative clause. After cén chuí, we use an indirect relative clause. And there's not really, I'm not sure if there's more of an explanation than that. It's just with these ones we use that form, with those ones we use that form. The other aspect of this question is, as Ben is suggesting, is that some of us prefer ceithhuil tú, some of us prefer conas a tá tú, some of us prefer Gaeilge tatu, and that's more of a dialect question, I think. We often have lots of different ways to say the same thing. Sometimes 3 different ways for 3 different dialects, but there could be more. And so, it might be a little bit funny if you're taking one phrase from Ulster and a different phrase from Connacht and another phrase from Munster, but maybe in another sense, it doesn't really matter too much. I would say if anyone has a strong feeling or connection about or to one of the dialects, then it's good to really drill in and try to specialize in that dialect. But we all still need to understand the other dialects too. So we can't just be sort of siloed into only saying ceithhuil tú, and then if you hear a different form, a different way to ask that question, you might be lost. So ceithhuil tú, I think, is the Connacht version of this question, I believe. Yeah. What would you say naturally, Ben?
Conas tá tú. Yeah.
With a little variation there too.
Yeah.
As I said, for me, Gaeilge tatu, that's what we learned at school in Tyrone.
So yeah, I mean, you might choose one over the other, like you might choose one over the other for reasons of cultural sensitivity. You know, if you're in Connemara and you're going to the pub, you might just decide to say "Céichí will" to everybody else
I might
saying
do
it.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's no big deal. It might just be a bit of crack. It might be more crack if you say "Cadé mar tátu," of course, but you know.
And as an Ulster man, I'm living in Dublin and I'm teaching in Dublin, so I'm dealing with a lot of people who are learners. So I often use conas because it's the shortest one and it's the simplest one. It's the most common one, really, regardless of the dialect. So I'm happy to use that. But when I'm with more confident speakers, or especially when I'm with Ulster people, it's Kijemira Tatu every time. Asking why is also like this. We already mentioned Kathia and Ken Fa, and I've heard there's a great Kerry broadcaster called Sinead Niulachan who works for RTE, and she's on a famous podcast. She always said Connahaeve, Connahaeve. Would you use that one down in Kerry, Ben?
Yeah, so that's cod in a have, what in relation to, let's say so.
Yeah,
Connahaeve.
It rhymes together like one word. Yeah.
Yeah, and cod chuige we would have, but it's a little bit different. It's not really why or what reason, it's what for.
For, yeah,
Yeah. So cod chuige sin, what's that for? Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a good point, that these phrases that we associate with one dialect or another, it's not usually 100%, you know, that if you use a Munster phrase in a different province, people won't understand, or that people don't say it. It's just generalizations that some of them tend to be more common in particular areas. I mean, just like our English, you know, how do you say hi, how are you where you're living? Is it what's up? Is it what's going on? You know, there's a lot of ways to ask that. And, you know, it kind of depends on the people around you, doesn't it? That sort of little, all those social issues, I suppose.
You won't say, how's it hanging to your granddad? Well, you might.
How's she cutting? That was an old one that used to be heard a lot.
That's Roscommon. Yeah, that's what my dad says from his Roscommon heritage.
Oh, you hear that?
Button, like a button is the answer.
How's she cutting like a button?
Yeah, that's it. Anava. So we don't really have any questions about somebody asking us Cén Chaoi bhfuil sibh, which is fair enough. We're Gaeilge, we're great. So one more question left that came in advance, and this is a very kind of broad question. There's, I'll have a go with this and see what you think as well. So I don't know if Jay is necessarily talking about us here now. I think it's, how does one get one's Irish speaking to sound melodic? I can hear this, but I don't know how to duplicate it. And I suppose this is one of those things that really depends on what your background is. I was watching an episode of Shea Malach, a documentary series on TG Cahir about Irish traditional musicians. I was watching the one about Paddy Keenan, the piper, last night. And, you know, he didn't really start playing pipes until he was 10 or 11. But when he picked the pipes up, the fact that he'd probably been listening to his dad playing the pipes since he was in the womb all came out, you know. So he'd already learned the language of the music, let's say, before he even started. So obviously, if you're growing up around a language, then you're going to internalize a lot of the rhythm of the language and how it should sound. So when you go to do it, it's going to be so much easier. And whatever way you've done that, whether it's by picking it up that way or whether it's through hard graft and study and application, it's a bit like a musician. Like Paddy Keenan still had to sit down with the pipes for hours and play them, but it would have been much faster for him to get to the stage where he no longer needed to think about playing the pipes and he was simply, you know, expressing whatever he was feeling. So a good musician doesn't play the same way every day, you know. So that's about being at ease with the language of the music and totally technically at ease with your technique on the instrument. So I suppose languages are a bit like that, in the sense that if you want to sound musical, I suppose you need to be comfortable with an awful lot of things, like where your shavus and your urus are, so that you're not stopping and tripping over them and thinking and considering and questioning every time you come to something. And through exposure, being familiar with the rhythm and sort of líneatanga, the syntax and the way that things sit in sentences. So it's I suppose in a way it's the result of all the other things that we talk about, and the end result is sounding melodic in your Irish speaking. So it doesn't sound like there's any simple way to sound melodic in your speaking. I suppose one thing is to keep an eye out for. There's a lot of alliteration in Irish, team tershach and these things. If you can identify these little expressions that use alliteration, and that's going to give an element of musicality or melody to your speech.
Well, I think Ben, we're a lot alike, because apart from Irish, like music is possibly the greatest other love for both of us. You know, or it's certainly up there. Passions, and to compare it as Jay and you just have to compare language to music is very appropriate, because it's sound. And you mentioned the word rhythm, and I think that's really, really important. Rhythm. Sometimes when we're learning a language, especially at first, you read each word by word, and you almost give equal importance to each word in the sentence, but that's not the way any sentence sounds. Not in English, not in Irish. If you take a simple sentence like Tommy and Shaw, it's not Tommy and Shaw, is it? It's 4 syllables. The first 3 of those syllables are quite weak, and Shaw is stronger. Tommy and Shaw, da 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 da. So there's a rhythm in it. Now, when it's printed on the page, all of those words are just black and white. So, it's not as if the Shaw is kind of highlighted in some way, but you could do that to sentences yourself and add a little underlining or something like that to show which words, which syllables should be stronger, and you get the rhythm of the sentence. Because if you change the rhythm of that short, very simple sentence, you change the meaning or make it unintelligible. If you say Tamiansha, nobody will understand you. If you make an the big syllable, Tamiansha, no one will understand. But when you get the rhythm, ba 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 ba, Tamiansha, correct, then people will hear you and understand it. So the rhythm is very important. And as Ben is saying, it's important to listen as much as possible. So in terms of another couple of practical tips, you could trying to sound more melodic. I take it Jay means sounding more fluent, more natural, the natural beauty of the language. It can be a bit stilted when you're reading out of a book for the very first time, but the more comfortable you are with each individual sound is one step. But then let's say you could take something like any Irish language content online on YouTube or on TG Cahir, for example, Ros na Rún. You could take it and watch along and repeat what they say. Now, you don't need to do an hour's worth of a program. You could take a couple of minutes of a conversation, and if you've got the subtitles, of course, that really, really helps. Ros na Rún has Irish language subtitles, I think, or it's a choice that you can make. But if you listen to the first line and someone says, where is the manager? Cowell and Bannister. You can stop the recording, play it again, listen again, repeat it. Cowell and Bannister, Cowell and Bannister. And you might hear a couple of little details that you didn't notice before, like the word an. Maybe the letter N is not so strongly heard. Cowell and Bannister. So close listening and repetition of good examples like that can get you into the rhythm of it, and you don't need to worry so much about the meaning of the words in that stage. There's so many things to put together, so we don't have to worry about the grammar if we're focusing on the pronunciation. I think Jay's question is about pronunciation, isn't it? So a little bit of repeating good examples which are online, and do say them out loud, because your voice, you know, this is all the mechanics of your mouth and your tongue and throat and everything, isn't it? So lips and everything. So you've got to, sometimes sounds are hard because your mouth is not used to doing them. You know, like the ch, the h is a bit difficult for some people, and that could be part of your practice. Maybe in another practice you're looking at grammar or vocab, but in this particular kind of practice, just repeating some phrases that you've heard in other places, and that cuts out the other kind of work. You don't have to invent the phrase or use your grammar skills. Just focus on the sound in this particular session. So hopefully that will help. Lots of listening, lots of speaking practice, but just copy what other people say, the way, their intonation, how they say it, and especially if they've got the dialect that you want to go for.
Absolutely. Yes, very nice. And talking about music, a message there has come in saying, where are we now? Can you recommend some songs in Irish that we might not have heard about? So I have a couple. So I might need your help with one of these, Neil. There's a band of brothers from Connemara, the O'Haras. Remember the name of the band? Brandon O'Hara, his brothers? No?
No, not myself, no.
No, they had a song I really liked years and years ago called Sheenta. It's really good. It's a sort of an indie song. Maybe that'll come to me. So that might come to me again. I might do a bit of research on that while you're looking up, or while you're telling us about your favorite songs.
It's kind of hard to answer, Raoul, because we don't necessarily know what you haven't heard of yet. So I often recommend Imlay as a modern group playing contemporary music, a little bit of R&B, indie, rock, hip-hop influences all mixed in. And so they're not very traditional, but great contemporary music. They've got 2 albums, I think, so far. I'm sure they're working on more. But they're a great band, Imlay, I-M-L-E Fada. And of course, there's so much recorded trad music and sean-nós and so on. My favorite Irish language songs are probably some of the most famous ones, to be honest with you. I really love songs like Ban Fajin and Bajin Elemi and Kajation Danchation. So groups like Clanad and so on. Yeah, if you go diving around with traditional Irish music, you'll definitely find Irish language songs. If you're looking for other styles of music, it is out there, but maybe not so much of it. But Imlay is my go-to recommendation for Irish language kind of pop music, I guess.
Okay. Someone who I really like is Sullivan.
Oh, yes.
A really, really good song called Iva. The language in it is mighty altogether, and the sentiment is really nice. It's about his mother. And then, of course, Keela have some good songs, and Run On Snuddig. So I like this song Iva by Sullivan. Then, as Neil mentioned, there's Imlay. Keela and Taobh Tuathal is a bit of a classic. I don't know. And I can't think of the name of that band, the Brothers O'Hara, I'm sorry, from Connemara, from Rua. That song Sheenta is great, though I don't know how easy it is to come by it these days anyway. I don't know if it made it into the digital realm, but it is a bit of a classic, really.
I'm sure someone has talked about there.
Yeah. Grant, so a bit of a trick question here, I think. How would you say the infinitive of to fart, and how would you conjugate it as Gaeilge? Yeah. So Brima Ligan, Brima Squeala, to let go of flatulence, let's say, to release flatulence into the galaxy. You'll find it on Tanglen. You know, BROIM is brime to fart. So you'll find that there. So great. Okay, grand. So I don't quite understand this.
Karen had a question there, or did you see that one?
From Karen? Yeah. Here we go.
Okay.
So Karen says, do you distinguish a positive why from a negative one? As in, why did you do that when you did a stupid thing?
Maybe with tone of voice.
Yeah,
if there's scorn in your voice, why did you do that? I don't know. Maybe in some other languages, you know, there's a different why if it's a nice positive thing and a why if it's more negative. I don't think so. Would be my answer, Karen. But it did make me think of negative questions in general. What I mean is why didn't you do that? Because we talked about why did you do that? Cén fa an nearna tú sin. Why did you do that? Cén fa an nearna tú sin. But why didn't you do that? Cén fa nach nearna tú sin. So the particle nach, or sometimes nar in the past tense, is used for negative questions. So that's something we didn't get into a lot in our course, actually, because negative questions, you know, it's another layer, I guess. But, you know, did you go? An neachitu? Didn't you go? A negative question. Nach neachitu? Didn't you go? So it is another very useful natural conversational format, I suppose. But using nach or maybe nar in the past tense. So erchanitu, did you buy? Didn't you buy something? Narchanitu, Rodegan. So we can just throw those on like we would have the other question particles an and So we put in nach or nar. That's negative questions. So not exactly what you're asking about, Karen, but thanks for the inspiration there.
Yes, Gurmaga the Nail. I'm still looking for the name of that band from Connemara. It eludes me, but in the meantime, someone's after recommending Sholin as well, which is a good option if you like things at the more kind of poppy end of the spectrum for Irish language music. Of course, Kneecap are pretty good too.
And I see we had a little welcome. We had a little hello from Belfast to there,
yeah.
So I'm sure they know about Kneecap. Very naughty boys, but pretty good music actually, and very, very funny lyrics as well. Just not for the faint-hearted, I suppose.
Okay, so I'm still on the track there of Dim Boys from Connemara, but no, can't find it. Okay. Togama, doesn't matter, Ben, let it go. Okay. So Sholin, yeah. So that's nice, breezy kind of pop. That's Gaeilge. Yeah. Togama.
There are shows, there are radio and podcasts where they try to, you know, make sure they play some Irish language music. It's Radio na Gaeilge, of course, and you know that certain people have shows where they try to make sure they at least include a little bit of Irish language content. So if you have a look at the Irish language radio stations and associated podcasts, you'll find some Irish language music for sure.
Okay. So Reesh, that's the band. I have it. Reesh or IFA the S. Okay, so I'll just throw that in. I think there are three brothers, the O'Haras. Cormac O'Hara is one of those brothers, but I don't think he's in the band. Sinead, see if you can find it. Rish Shinte. Good song from around 2001.
Okay. I gotta check it out. I don't know that one myself. So Kahime Dulcitora.
Hagan son Reintas na Stáisiún radio agus mar sin luig tú with Radio na Gaeltachta. So some great radio programs on Radio na Gaeltachta all through the day really and at night. Then Radio na Lifa is in Dublin. You get a fair amount of kind of more underground stuff on there in the evenings.
And isn't there that show you mentioned, the Keela song and Taobh Tuachal ach is it Cian no Cuivan? Yeah, it does. I used to present that show myself for a number of years. Yeah, so that's a good show. That's too. More about alternative music, is it?
It's alternative music, but the flavors vary throughout the course of the week. So at the weekend, it's more kind of electronic and clubby music, and then the start of the week, it's more kind of all sorts of alternative stuff. Yeah. And on Sunday nights, I used to make it kind of more of a kind of a global sound music, like reggae and African stuff and that kind of thing. And then Radio Fáilte up reached was a male first. Yeah. So you find music on there. There's a music program on TG Cahir at the moment, presented by Cian from Imlay. I don't know the name of it, but that kind of looks at kind of breaking artists on the
I'm sure that's. I haven't seen that myself either, but I thought I can't wait to watch this, and then it slipped out of my mind as these things can do. But it's a little bit like those classic music shows where they present a few different artists playing a few songs. So
that's it. And there's generally somebody with some sort of Irish language element to their music featured on that as well. So Aisha Sullivan, absolutely, all the time. Fáilte Raoul.
I'd just like to, Dalton said hello there, and I'd just like to show the way he formed the question. Hi, Gaeilge, Gaeilge Martasha Venue. So that's lovely Ulster Irish there. Gaeilge, that word that you see, G-O-I-D, ifada. That is, Ben would say that cad-e, Gaeilge, but we kind of run it together. The D becomes slender, and then it ends up being written like this. Gaeilge. Sometimes it's written C-A-D, new word ifada. Sometimes it's written G-O-I-D, ifada. Well, that's a lovely example of Ulster Irish there. So Maihu Dalton, Cringe Linder and Machri, Gaeilge Golua, Island Shaw. Lovely to see Ulster Irish always from me. Maihu.
Okay. There's a message there from Hammer Kane. I'm not sure I understand entirely. I'm about 300 words in my Irish
vocabulary.
Okay, fair enough. Would take a long to try to write a question in Irish, and I wish it was not the case, but it is. What would be the best learning tool for folks like me? Well, I mean, as it happens, we have a module that focuses on that entirely, and we also have a whole rake of other modules and courses that are targeted for people who have a 300-word vocabulary and would like to build it. So, all other things, leaving all other things aside, we do work hard on creating learning courses and tools for people in your situation, Hammer Kane.
So we have our foundations membership. At that level, there are several mini courses which deal with the absolute basics of Irish. So if you're a beginner, that might be a nice place to start, a true beginner. If you're returning to Irish, that might not go far enough for you. It might be a little bit too simple. But there's really great basic information just about what the language is like, and a guide to pronunciation, which is very useful. But then after that, in the Grow and Explore membership levels, Our course for beginners there is called Tusma, from the old Shanachal Tusma Latin Hibre. A good start is half the work. So Tusma is a good start. So I'd recommend to anyone, if you're really just beginning, have a look at Foundations and that membership and the courses, the little mini courses that are there, dipping your toes in, so to speak. But if you want to get on and be making nice questions and developing, progressing your Irish, you can't stay in Foundations forever. You need to move on to Grow or Explore membership, where we have a lot more detail, which will bring you up to that intermediate and hopefully advanced level.
Lovely. And if you're at an earlier level and you just like a tool to give you a little bit of motivation and suggestions in terms of what you could do at an early stage to motivate you and just to build a little bit of Irish into your daily routine, we have a free ebook called 10 Secrets for Practicing Irish Every Day, and you'll find it just at that address there below on the graphic. And we also have a free email course, Irish language for beginners, and so you can try that out as well and see if there's anything for you there. Just have a little look, see if we've any more comments before we wrap things up here.
Hammer's just asked what are they called. I think it's the different courses and memberships and so on. If you go to bitesize.irish/links, I think you can find everything from there, really.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So you'll find the different memberships. That's it. Yeah. And then there's the link there to the memberships page. But if you go to links, you'll find other bits and pieces, resources, and little things to help you find where you should be starting on your Irish language study journey. So I hope that there's something there for everybody.